Every December, my phone would light up like clockwork with a cheerful ding. Christmas plans, everyone. The message, always from Mom, usually came right after the last Thanksgiving leftovers were tossed. A group text thread labeled Family Thread, complete with snowman emojis and too many exclamation marks, would buzz to life. This year, my phone was quiet. I sat on the couch in my Seattle apartment, legs tucked beneath me, coffee mug warming my hands. Outside, the rain tapped steadily against the windows, creating a rhythm that made the silence in my living room feel even heavier. My Christmas tree stood half-decorated in the corner, its white lights blinking politely over bare branches. No wrapped gifts beneath it, just a faux fur rug and a feeling I couldn't quite shake. I told myself it was an oversight. Maybe someone forgot to hit send. Maybe they were busy. But as I refreshed the group chat for the third time that morning and still saw nothing, something inside me whispered what I already knew. I'd been left out again. I set my phone down and walked into the kitchen. The smell of dark roast filled the space, and I pressed the French press slowly, watching the grains swirl downward. I reached for my favorite mug, chipped on one side, a silly souvenir from a tech conference in Austin, and tried to focus on the warmth in my hands instead of the chill in my chest. On the fridge, a magnet held a Christmas card from last year. It was a photo of my parents, my brother Dan with his 2 kids, my sister Sam with her then new boyfriend, all smiling in matching pajamas at a snowy cabin in Tahoe. I wasn't in it. I hadn't even known about the trip until the photo popped up on social media. My phone buzzed. For a second, hope flared. But it was just a work email. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Bagels, Tasha announced as she breezed in, carrying a brown paper bag and a gust of cold air. And moral support. You looked tragic in your text. I gave her a look. I sent a thumbs up emoji. Exactly. She handed me a still warm sesame bagel and kicked off her boots. No group text from the Linwoods yet? I shook my head. Tasha sat beside me, biting into her bagel. They forgot again? Maybe they're still deciding. She raised an eyebrow. Girl, it's December 10th. Your family plans Christmas like a military operation. This feels deliberate. I didn't respond. The quiet said enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the rain softening into mist outside. Tasha reached for the remote and turned on a holiday playlist. Bing Crosby's voice filled the space, singing about a white Christmas. It felt like a joke. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Grandma June. Hey, baby, her warm voice came through the speaker. Just checking in. You good? Hi, Grandma. Yeah, I'm fine. Just enjoying the rain. Oh, I missed that Seattle rain. I heard it's snowing already in Aspen. They say the whole family's headed there this year. My breath caught. Aspen? Your mom said it was a last-minute decision. Something about wanting a change from Tahoe. I can't keep up with you all. I forced a laugh. Yeah, sounds fancy. Wish I could make it, but your grandfather's old recliner has a firmer hold on me than gravity these days. We chatted for a few more minutes about her cat, her knitting, and how she still didn't understand Instagram, but my mind was elsewhere. After we hung up, I sat staring at the wall. Aspen. A resort Christmas. Again, without me. The ding of an email snapped me back. I glanced at my screen. It was from Aunt Lorraine. Subject line. Booking confirmed. Aspen Lodge. Below was the resort itinerary. She'd meant to send it to Mom, Dan, and Sam, but somehow I'd been CC'd. 6 names were listed. None of them were mine. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just forgetting. This was a choice. I turned to Tasha and handed her the phone. She read the screen and let out a low whistle. Damn, that's cold, even for a mountain trip. I gave a small, humorless laugh. Well, at least now I know. Tasha leaned in. So, what are you gonna do? I looked down at the itinerary, the resort name bold at the top. Silver Pines Lodge, Aspen, Colorado. My reflection flickered in the black screen. I took a slow sip of coffee and said, something they'll never forget. By Thursday, I was sitting in a high-backed leather chair across from the general manager of Silver Pines Resort, a warm fire crackling in the stone hearth beside us. Mr. Alden, a trim man in his 60s with weary eyes and a maroon sweater that tried its best to look festive, leaned forward slightly as I slid the folder across the table. The number inside made his brows rise. I take it you're serious, he said, running a hand over his neatly parted hair. I wouldn't be here if I weren't, I replied. He hesitated, clearly weighing more than just numbers. You're not with a holding company? A management firm? No. This is personal, I said, meeting his eyes. I'll keep your current staff. I want the place preserved, not gutted. Outside the window, soft snow was drifting over the pine-covered slopes. It was everything I used to imagine when my classmates came back from their winter break ski trips, showing off photos from Colorado lodges and stories of chairlift crushes. I hadn't gone on a single one. My parents always said it was too expensive, yet they somehow managed a yearly family getaway without me now. I was done being the forgotten one. 3 days earlier, I'd been pacing the rooftop terrace of my office in San Francisco, still raw from the Aspen email. The city skyline stretched out around me, glass and steel catching golden afternoon light. I was in my element, in control except when it came to my family. I had opened my laptop right there on the rooftop, coffee in hand, and typed in Silver Pines Lodge Aspen ownership. One click led to another. Articles about post-COVID closures, shifts in travel behavior, seasonal debt. A quote from Mr. Alden in a regional news piece caught my eye. We're holding on, but it's been hard. By the next morning, I had my legal advisor looped in via video call and a scheduled flight to Colorado. Tasha called just before I boarded. So let me get this straight. You're flying to Aspen to buy the place your family booked for Christmas? I smiled, adjusting my coat collar as I passed through security. Yes, you're seriously going to buy their Christmas? It's not about revenge, I said. It's about access. They forgot me again, Tasha. But this time, I'm going to be there anyway. On my terms. The resort was everything the pictures had promised. Cedar beams arching over vaulted ceilings, leather armchairs, thick rugs, and fireplaces flickering in nearly every room. Silver Pines wasn't flashy, it was classic, the kind of place with 60-year-old snow globes in the gift shop and holiday music that came from speakers hidden in wreaths. It was also, I could tell, aging at the edges. Mr. Alden greeted me with professional courtesy, unaware of my full intentions at first. I told him I was exploring potential investments and wanted to understand the property's operations. He took me on a tour past the hot cocoa station, through the wood-paneled library, and out onto a snowy balcony overlooking the mountains. It's been tough, he admitted. Loyal guests, yes. But loyal guests don't keep the lights on forever. When we sat down again in his office, I made my offer. It was more than fair, enough to preserve staff and begin small renovations, with the caveat that all current holiday bookings would remain untouched. Including, I added carefully, the Linwood party. 6 guests, December 23rd through 26th. Don't move them. Don't upgrade. Just let everything unfold. He raised an eyebrow. You're connected to them? In a way, I said. Let's just say I'd like to keep that information private for now. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. You'll want this to be quiet then? Until I decide otherwise. The legal paperwork was already drafted. My advisor joined via video call from San Francisco, walking us through the final signatures. Mr. Alden initialed where instructed, then handed me the last page. Welcome to Silver Pines, Ms. Linwood, he said, shaking my hand. The warmth of the fire glowed against the polished table. I kept my face composed, but inside, something in me shifted. Not victory. Not revenge. Just certainty. For once, I wouldn't be on the outside looking in. That evening, I checked into a suite with a fireplace, mountain views, and a complimentary tray of peppermint bark. The staff, now technically my staff, had no idea they were serving their new owner. And I wanted it that way. I sat on the plush bed, laptop open. The resort itinerary email was still in my inbox, the header cheerful in its obliviousness. Linwood Family Christmas Adventure. Beneath it, a note from my mother. Can't wait to celebrate with the 6 of us. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I whispered, make that 7. There they were, my entire family, clustered near the front desk, in varying states of winter wear and travel fatigue. My father was unzipping his coat while barking something about reservations. Mom stood slightly behind him, hair still helmeted from the flight, clutching a color-coded itinerary folder like it was a fragile relic. Dan was wrangling his 2 kids, who were already bickering over who got the bigger suitcase. Sam, always the least frazzled of the group, had one hand looped through her fiancé's arm and the other scrolling her phone. Then someone looked up. Mom, I think, or maybe Sam. And like dominoes, the rest of them turned. No one said anything at first. I had checked in hours earlier, requested that the staff treat me as any other guest, and spent most of the afternoon by the fireplace in the library, reacquainting myself with the scent of cedar and old books. When I spotted their shuttle pulling up through the snowy window, I closed my novel and made my way calmly to the lobby. Now, under the amber light of the massive chandelier, we stood in the same space for the first time in over a year, and the air tightened. Rachel. Mom's voice cracked the silence. You're here. I gave a small nod. I am. Dad cleared his throat. Didn't realize you'd booked. I smiled, carefully neutral. Oh, I didn't book. But I have a room. One of the good ones. Dan's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. His wife whispered something to him, probably something neutral like play nice. Sam offered a half smile. Wow, this is a surprise. I let that hang in the air. Good surprises keep things interesting. Behind the desk, the young woman who had checked me in the day before was doing an admirable job pretending she didn't know my last name had changed hands with the title deed. She clicked away at her keyboard, handing keys to my family, directing them to their cozy slopeside standard rooms, complete with twin bunks for the kids and a fireplace that might still work if someone jiggled the knob just right. I offered a small wave. See you around. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked back toward the grand staircase. My boots echoed softly on the polished wood. I could feel their eyes on me all the way up. Dinner was held in the main lodge dining room that evening, roasted chicken with thyme, mashed sweet potatoes, and winter greens served on heavy ceramic plates. The tables were long, dressed in cranberry runners and flickering with votive candles. It was festive, warm, inviting. I had made a reservation for myself at a table by the window alone. From my vantage point, I could see them, my parents, Dan's family, Sam and her fiancé, all clustered around a larger table in the center of the room. I didn't expect them to invite me over. They didn't. But I wasn't there to be invited. Halfway through the meal, Dad stood, lifting his glass. To family, he began, his voice hearty and full of practiced confidence. To Marilyn for planning all this. To Dan and Rebecca, raising 2 wonderful kids. To Sam and Connor on their engagement. And to Grandma, who we miss so much this time of year. A round of clinks, murmured cheers, and one awkward silence later, they sat down again. No one mentioned me. I raised my own glass slowly. To being unforgettable, I said, not loudly, but with enough clarity to carry. Even when uninvited. No one responded. Sam glanced my way, her face unreadable. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad took a long sip of wine. When dinner was over, I returned to my suite. The fireplace was already lit. Housekeeping must have remembered my earlier request, and the room glowed in gold and amber. I kicked off my boots and let my coat slide from my shoulders, sinking into the armchair near the hearth. Outside, snow continued to fall, soft and persistent, blanketing the pines and muffling the world beyond the windows. I picked up the resort's welcome gift, peppermint truffles wrapped in foil, and unwrapped one slowly, letting the bitterness melt on my tongue. This wasn't what Christmas was supposed to feel like, maybe, but it was what mine felt like now. And oddly, there was peace in knowing I didn't have to beg for a seat anymore. As the fire crackled beside me, I whispered to the quiet, let's see how tomorrow feels. I didn't come here to make a scene, I came to take up space. Christmas Eve morning greeted the mountains with a dusting of snow so perfect it looked painted on. I stood near the lobby's main hearth in my knit turtleneck and boots, steam curling from my travel mug as I checked my phone. The shuttle from the airport was right on time. I gave a small nod to the front desk staff as I passed them. She's arriving now, I said softly. Please be sure someone helps her with her bags, and let her know I'll be waiting just outside the dining room. Mr. Alden, the resort's GM, caught my eye from across the lobby and gave me a subtle, knowing smile. I returned it. There was something satisfying in the quiet coordination of all of this. The seating, the gifts, the way a dozen small acts would add up to something they wouldn't forget. By the time I reached the dining hall, the Linwoods were already gathering at our assigned table, a long oak one near the front windows. Pine garlands and little brass bells hung from overhead beams, and cinnamon rolls the size of my palm steamed on every plate. The smell of warm cider, cloves, and baked sugar floated around us. Good morning, everyone, I said brightly as I approached. A few mumbled greetings returned, followed by the clatter of silverware. Dad was in his element, warm in his red sweater, holding court at the head of the table. Dan's team got preliminary approval for the new research wing, he told everyone, swelling with pride. Game changer for outpatient cardiac care. He's really pushing innovation. Well, of course, Mom chimed in, sipping cider. And Sam's ring. Did everyone see? It's vintage Art Deco. Connor has exquisite taste. You must show them again, darling. Sam lifted her hand as the others leaned in with admiration. I opened my mouth gently. I've actually been working on. Oh, Rachel, Mom interrupted, not unkindly. Would you pass the butter? I passed it. My unfinished sentence landed on the plate like an extra roll. Next try, I thought. Later. We were halfway through our second round of coffee when the sound of the lobby doors opening echoed in the hall. A moment later, Grandma June entered, frail but glowing, flanked by 2 bellhops helping with her suitcase. She wore her signature holiday brooch, the one shaped like a cardinal, and a long knit scarf I'd sent her last year. Well, Would you look at that, she announced cheerfully. Chairs scraped back. The Linwoods turned, shocked and delighted. Mom. Dad jumped up. Grandma, you made it? Sam stood and rushed over to hug her. I thought you said the flights were too much this year? Oh, things worked out, she said simply, eyes twinkling. I had a little help. No one asked who. Not a single person turned to me, even though I was already standing, my hands folded politely. As she was seated next to me, Grandma June took my hand under the table and gave it a gentle squeeze. You're glowing, she whispered. And I'm proud. We returned to eating. I made another attempt at conversation. I've actually been working with a couple of hospital systems on. Rachel, dear, Mom said, reaching for her purse. I just remembered I brought extra gloves in case you forgot yours. You always forget gloves. I didn't, but I smiled. Thanks, Mom. It was always this way, moments stacked like cards, each one seeming harmless on its own, but together forming a fortress I could never get through. Then, just as the plates were being cleared, Mr. Alden approached our table. His timing was impeccable. He cleared his throat. Pardon the interruption, folks, he said warmly, addressing the entire group. But I wanted to personally thank Ms. Linwood for her vision and support of Silver Pine's future. We're lucky to have her. There it was. A beat too loud. A bit too pointed. The table went still. Dad blinked. Vision? Mom turned slowly. What's he talking about? I dabbed at my mouth with my napkin, then folded it carefully and set it beside my plate. My voice was calm when I replied, Oh, I own this place now. Merry Christmas. The silence was exquisite. Connor coughed. Dan's fork clinked against his plate. Sam stared at me, open-mouthed. Wait, Dad said. You bought? I did, I said. About a week ago. Mom laughed lightly, the sound hollow. You're joking, right? I turned to Mr. Alden. Thanks again, I told him gently. We'll be in touch after the holidays. He nodded and stepped away. Why would you buy a ski resort? Sam asked, blinking. It was available. And meaningful. I stood slowly, smoothing my sweater. Tomorrow, I'd love to treat you all to a private brunch. Something quieter, just us. I'll explain everything then. As I turned, Grandma June reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze, one that said she understood exactly what I was doing and why. The firelight caught the gold in her brooch, and for a moment, I felt like a child again seen, just for being me. The private suite we'd reserved for Christmas Day brunch had been staged exactly how I wanted. White linens, crisp poinsettias on every table, a fireplace crackling in the corner, and mountain views stretching beyond the glass windows like a postcard someone forgot to write. The resort's chef had gone all out, fluffy pancakes, smoked salmon, roasted vegetables, and carafes of fresh squeezed orange juice ready to meet champagne. I stood near the window, coffee in hand, watching as my family filed in, one by one. Sam arrived first, trailing Connor. She offered me a polite smile, then quickly found her seat. Dan followed, his wife whispering something to him I couldn't hear. The kids bounded toward the table before being wrangled back with reminders about inside voices. My parents walked in together, expressions neutral but not warm. Grandma June came last, arm hooked with a bellhop who looked both honored and nervous. Happy Christmas, I said lightly. There were a few U2s. Mostly, it was just the clinking of cutlery and the shuffle of chairs as people settled. I waited until the plates were filled, the second round of mimosas poured, and the smallest signs of comfort began to emerge, shoulders relaxing, napkins tucked into laps. Then I stood and gently tapped the edge of my glass with a spoon. I'd like to say something. The room quieted. A few sets of eyes turned toward me with polite curiosity. Others looked away. I took a breath. You didn't invite me, I began, voice steady. Again. And I didn't come here to argue about that. I came because I was done hiding who I am. I moved toward the screen I'd asked the staff to set up earlier. Simple, unobtrusive, pulled down from the wall like we were in an old-school classroom. For the last few years, while I got your postcards from family vacations I wasn't on, and polite replies to Christmas texts I sent into a void, I was building something. A slideshow began, silent images fading one into the next. The first was of my old San Francisco apartment, cramped and cluttered, where TechBridge was born between stacks of takeout containers and code. Then, our first contract with a local clinic. Then more, hospital systems, interviews, photos of our growing team in hoodies and headsets. A map appeared, dotted with our reach over a dozen health networks nationwide. Then the Forbes cover, me, smiling but sharp, beneath the headline, "The Architect of Safer Healthcare." There was a long silence. Sam's fork hovered midair. Dan's jaw tightened, eyes flicking from the screen to me. Dad sipped his coffee, saying nothing. I turned off the slideshow and returned to the table. I didn't do all that to impress you. I did it because it mattered to me, to the people we help, to every patient whose records are safer because of what we built. I picked up a small stack of gift envelopes, each tied with ribbon. I also wanted to give something to each of you, I continued. Not as a statement. Just as a gesture. A start. I walked to Dad and handed him his envelope. A full smart home upgrade, I said. Security, automation, energy efficiency. So you don't have to argue with thermostats anymore. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. To you, Mom, I said, handing her another. A digital archive service. I had all your old photo boxes scanned and preserved. Everything's labeled, searchable, safe. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Dan, I said, handing his over. Early access to our physician's scheduling optimization tool. I heard you've been struggling to manage clinic rotations. This'll make it easier. His brow furrowed, as though unsure if it was a challenge or a gift. Sam, I said, softer. Our AI wedding planner app. Customizable checklists, vendor sync, everything. So you can spend more time enjoying, less time stressing. She blinked, and for the first time that day, gave me a genuine smile. Thanks, she said, almost under her breath. For the kids, I continued, passing 2 smaller envelopes across the table. Educational tech credits. Robotics kits, learning games, online STEM workshops, whatever they're curious about. Then I turned to Grandma June and knelt beside her. For you, I said, placing a soft tablet case in her lap. A new device, fully customized, larger text, voice control, reminders, recipes. Plus, lifetime tech support. From me, personally. She touched my cheek, eyes glassy. You thought of all this, she said. Of each of us. I nodded. That's what I do. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. I tried, I said. For years. At dinner tables. In phone calls. I shared little wins. Big ideas. But no one ever followed up. It was like I was speaking in static. Mom's voice was barely audible. We always believed in you. I turned to her. No, Mom. You believed in the version of me you wished I was. The one who did things the right way. Quiet, agreeable, not too ambitious. And when I wasn't that, you looked away. She lowered her gaze. No one else spoke. The silence stretched, but this time it didn't hurt. It clarified. Then Grandma June lifted her glass. To the granddaughter, she said firmly, who saw herself even when others didn't. And with that, we all raised our glasses. Mine trembled slightly, but it was steady enough. It was early, just past 7, when I wheeled my suitcase into the lobby of Silver Pines. The resort, usually buzzing with children dragging sleds and adults hunting coffee, was still hushed. A few guests were checking out, murmuring softly as they passed through the grand doors. The smell of cinnamon from yesterday's brunch still lingered faintly in the air. I walked to the front desk, where the morning concierge greeted me with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Miss Linwood," she said, tapping on her keyboard. "We've arranged for your car and luggage, as requested." I smiled politely. "Thank you." Hearing that name, Ms. Linwood, owner, still felt slightly surreal, but satisfying in its own quiet way. Not a title to flaunt, just something that belonged to me now. I was slipping on my gloves when I heard footsteps behind me. "Rachel." I turned. My parents stood there, dressed for travel. Dad was holding a neatly wrapped box, department store ribbon, still creased from the bag. Mom smiled a little too quickly. "We wanted to give you something before you left," she said, handing it over. I took the gift and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a pale gray scarf, cashmere, soft, still bearing the price tag. "It's lovely," I said, and meant it, in the way one means thank you even when the gesture feels more like obligation than understanding. "We weren't sure what you liked these days," Dad added, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's okay," I replied gently. "Thanks for thinking of me." Dan walked by a minute later, nodding once. No words. That was fine too. I was zipping up my coat when Sam approached. She looked hesitant, hands shoved into her coat pockets. "Hey," she said. "You got a minute?" I nodded, stepping to the side with her near the old snowshoe display by the fireplace. "I didn't know it was that hard for you," she said quietly. "I mean, I knew Mom and Dad could be tunnel-visioned, but I didn't realize how invisible it made you feel." I studied her face. It wasn't defensive, just honest. Maybe the first time it had ever really been that between us. "You didn't have to know," I said. "You just had to notice." She swallowed. "I should have." I nodded. She reached out and touched my arm. "Let's not wait another 5 years, okay? Only if we show up for real this time," I said. "Not just physically." Her eyes brimmed, and we hugged, brief but real. Outside, the car door was already open. Grandma June sat inside, her scarf tucked neatly around her neck. We were spending New Year's together in San Francisco. She'd never been, and I had a whole itinerary planned: sourdough, bay views, a museum or two, and long evenings on the couch with cocoa and stories I hadn't heard yet. As the driver pulled away, I looked back once. My family stood on the steps, some waving, some already distracted. It didn't sting this time. It just was. The trees blurred past as we wound down the snow-lined road. With each mile, I felt something loosen, a tightness in my chest I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Halfway to the airport, my phone buzzed. "Tasha, next Christmas, beach or vineyard?" I smiled, thumb hovering over the keyboard for a moment. Me, anywhere I'm not invisible. As I watched the snowy trees fade into the distance, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt light, like something heavy had finally been set down. I came into this hoping to be seen by them, but what I found was a deeper truth. I had already seen myself. Sometimes we wait years for the recognition we think we need, only to realize that real peace comes from honoring who we are quietly, steadily, without apology. Family doesn't always know how to love us right away, but we can choose to love ourselves and open the door when others are finally ready to try. If this story reminded you of a time you stood your ground with grace, I'd love to hear it. Your voice matters, and so do you.